The Skin Collector by Jeffrey Deaver. The basement. She had to go to the basement. Chloe hated it down there. But they'd sold out of sizes 10 and 12 Rue de Conde, the tacky little floral number with the scalloped hemline and plunging front. And she needed to replenish the racks, fill them up for the grazers. Chloe was an actress, not a retail fashion expert, and new to the store, so she hadn't fathomed why, in a November impersonating January, these particular dresses were selling out. Until her boss explained that even though the store was in alternative Soho in Manhattan, the zip codes of the purchasers situated them in Jersey, Westchester, and Long Island. And cruises, Chloe. Cruises. Ah. Chloe Moore walked into the back of the store. Here, the shop was the opposite of the sales floor and about as chic as a storage unit. She found the key among these dangling from her wrist and unlocked the basement door. She flicked on the lights and studied the unsteady stairs. A sigh, and she started down. The door on a spring swung shut behind her. Not a small woman, Chloe took the steps carefully. She was also on her Vera Wang knockoffs. Pseudo-designer heels and 100-year-old architecture can be a dangerous combination. The basement. Hated it. Not that she worried about intruders, there was only one door in and out. The one she'd just come through. But the place was moldy, damp, and cold, and booby-trapped with cobwebs, which meant sly, predatory spiders. And Chloe knew she'd need a dog roller to remove the dust from the dark green skirt and black blouse, La Bordeaux and La Seine. She stepped into uneven, cracked concrete floor, moving to the left to avoid a big web, but another one got her. A long, clinging strand clutched her face, tickling. After a comical dance of trying to brush the thing off and not fall over, she continued her search. 5 minutes later, she found the shipments of Rue de Condes, which may have looked French and sounded French, but came in boxes printed largely with Chinese characters. As she tugged the cartons off the shelf, Chloe heard a scrape. She froze, tilted her head. The sound didn't repeat, but then she was aware of another noise. Drip, drip, drip. Was there a leak? Chloe came down here often, if reluctantly, and she'd never heard water. She stacked the faux French garments near the stairs and turned to investigate. Most of the inventory was on shelves, but some cartons rested on the floor. A leak could be disastrous, and while, yes, Chloe was eventually headed for Broadway, she nonetheless needed to keep her job here as Chez Nord for the foreseeable future. Stopping a leak before it ruined $10,000 worth of overpriced clothes might go a long way in keeping those paychecks dribbling into Chase. She walked to the back of the cellar, determined to find the leak, though also on serious spider alert. The dripping grew louder as she moved toward the rear of the room, even murkier than the front near the stairs. Chloe stepped behind a shelf containing a large supply of blouses so ugly even her mother wouldn't wear them. A major order by a buyer who Chloe believed had made the purchase because he knew he was going to be sacked. Drip, drip, squinting. Odd. What was that? The far wall and access door was open, the sound of water coming from there. The door, painted gray like the walls, was about 3 feet by 4. What did it lead to? Was there a sub-basement? She'd never seen the doorway, but then she didn't believe she'd ever glanced at the wall behind the last shelf. There was no reason to. And why was it open? The city was always doing construction work, especially in the older parts, such as here, Soho, but nobody had talked to the clerks, her at least, about a repair beneath the building. Maybe that weird Polish or Romanian or Russian janitor was doing some repairs? But no, couldn't be. The manager didn't trust him, and he didn't have the keys to the basement door. Okay, the creep factor was rising. Don't bother figuring it out. Tell Marge about the drip. Tell her about the doorway. Get Vlad or Mikhail, or whatever his name is, down here and let him earn his salary. Then another scrape. This time it seemed to be a foot shifting on gritty concrete. Fuck, that's it. Get out. But before she got out, before she even spun an eighth turn away, he was on her from behind, slamming her head into the wall. He pressed a cloth over her mouth to gag her, and she nearly fainted from the shock. A burst of pain blossomed in her neck. Chloe turned fast to face him. Oh, God. She nearly puked, seeing the yellowish latex full head mask. Both slots for eyes and mouth and ears, tight and distorting the flesh underneath as if his face had been melted. He was in workers' coveralls, some logo on them, but she couldn't read. Crying and shaking her head, she was pleading through the gag, screaming through the gag, which he kept pressed firmly in place with a hand in a glove as tight and sickly yellow as the mask. Listen to me, please. Don't do this. You don't understand. Listen. Listen. But the words were just random sounds from under the cloth. Thinking, why didn't I clock the door open? I thought about it, furious with herself. His calm eyes looked over her, but not at her breast or lips or hips or legs, just the skin of her bare arms, her throat, her neck, where he focused intently on a small blue tattoo of a tulip. Not bad, not good, he whispered. She was whimpering, shivering, and moaning. What do you want? Why did she even ask? She knew. Of course she knew. And with that thought, Chloe controlled the fear. She tightened her heart. Okay, asshole. Wanna play? You'll pay. She went limp. His eyes, surrounded by yellow latex like sickly skin, seemed confused. The attacker, apparently not expecting her to collapse, adjusted his grip to keep her from falling. But as soon as she felt his hand slacken, Chloe lunged forward and grabbed the collar of his overalls. The zipper popped and the cloth tore, both the outer garment and whatever was underneath it. Her grip and the blows aimed at his chest and face were fierce. She pumped her knee upward toward his groin, again and once more. But she didn't connect. Her aim was off. It seemed such an easy target, but she was suddenly uncoordinated and dizzy. He was cutting off her air supply with the gag. That was it, maybe? Or the aftermath of the shock. She tried to hit him again, claw at his flesh, but she now found her energy fading fast. Her hands tapped uselessly against him, her head lolled and looking down. She noticed that his sleeve had written up. Chloe caught sight of a weird tattoo, in red. Some insect. Dozens of little insect legs, insect fangs, but human eyes. And then she focused on the floor of the cellar. A glint from the hypodermic syringe. That was the source of the pain in her neck, and of her fleeing strength. He'd injected her with something. Whatever the drug, it was taking effect in a big way. She was growing exhausted. Her mind tumbled as if dipping into and out of a dream. For some reason, she found herself obsessing over cheap perfume she Nord sold by the checkout counter. I would buy that crap. Why didn't... What am I doing? She thought as clarity returned. Fight! Fight the son of a bitch! But her hands were at her sides now, completely still, and her head was heavy as stone. She was sitting on the floor, and then the room tilted and began to move. He was dragging her toward the access door. No, not there, please. Listen to you, Listen, I can explain why you shouldn't do this. Don't take me there. Here in the cellar proper? At least there was still some hope that Marge would look down the stairs and see them both, and she'd scream and he'd scramble off on his insect legs, but once Chloe was deep in the underground in his bug nest, it would be too late. The room was growing dark, but an odd kind of dark, as if the ceiling bulbs, which were still on, were not emitting light, but drawing in rays and extinguishing them. Fight! But she couldn't. Closer to the black abyss. Drip, drip, drip. Scream! She did, but no sound came out of her mouth beyond a hiss, a cricket click, a beetle hum. Then he was easing her through a door into Wonderland, on the other side, like that movie or cartoon or whatever. She saw a small utility room below. Chloe believed she was falling over and over, and a moment later she was on the floor. The ground, the dirt, trying to breathe, the air kicked out of her lungs from the impact, but no pain. No pain at all. The sound of dripping water was more pronounced, and she saw it trickle down the far wall made of old stone laced with pipes and wires and rusty, frayed, and rotted. Drip, drip. A trickle of insect venom, of shiny, clear insect blood. Thinking, Alice, I am Alice. Down the rabbit hole, the hookah-smoking caterpillar, the March hare, and the red queen, the red insect on his arm. She never liked that goddamn story. Chloe gave up on screaming. She wanted only to crawl away, to cry and huddle, to be left alone. She couldn't move. She lay on her back, staring up at the faint light from the basement of the store that she hated working in. The store that she wanted with all her soul to be back inside right now, standing on sore feet and nodding with fake enthusiasm. No, it makes you look so thin, really. Then the light grew dimmer yet as her attacker, the yellow-faced insect, climbed into the hole, pulled the access door shut behind them, and came down the short ladder to where she lay. A moment later, piercing light filled the tunnel. He pulled a miner's lamp onto his forehead and clicked it on. The white beam blinded, and she screamed, or didn't scream, at the piercing brilliance, which suddenly faded to complete darkness. She woke up a few seconds or minutes or a year later. Chloe was someplace else now. Not the utility room, but in a larger room. No, a tunnel. Hard to see, since the only illumination was a weak light above her, and the focused beam from the masked insect man's forehead. It blinded her every time he looked at her face. She was on her back again, staring upward, and he was kneeling over her. But what she'd been expecting, dreading, wasn't happening. In a way, though, this was worse, because that, ripping off her clothes and then what would follow, would at least have been understandable. They would have fallen into a known category of horror. This was different. Yes, her blouse was tugged up, but only slightly, exposing her belly from the navel to the bottom of her bra, which was still chastely in place. Her skirt was tucked tight around her thighs, almost as if he didn't want there to be any suggestion of impropriety. Leaning forward, hunched, intent, he was staring with those calm eyes of his, those insect eyes, at her smooth, white belly skin, the way somebody would look over a canvas at the MoMAs, head tilted, getting the right angle to appreciate Jackson Pollock's splatter, Marguerite's green apple. He then slowly extended his index finger, stroked her flesh, his yellow finger. He splayed his palm and brushed back and forth. He pinched and raised peaks of skin between his thumb and forefinger. He let go and watched the mounds flatten back. His insect mouth curved into a faint smile. She thought he said, "Very nice." Or maybe that was the smoke ring caterpillar talking, or the bug on his arm. She heard a faint hum of vibration. He looked at his watch. Another hum from somewhere else. Then he glanced at her face and saw her eyes. He seemed surprised, maybe, that she was awake. Turning, he tugged into view a backpack and removed from it a filled hypodermic syringe. He stabbed her again, this time in a vein in her arm. The warmth flowed and the fear lessened, as darkness trickled around her, sounds vanishing. She saw his yellow fingers, his caterpillar fingers, his insect claws reach into the backpack once more and carefully remove a small box. He set it beside her exposed skin with the same reverence she remembered her priest displaying as he placed the silver vessel holding the blood of Christ on the altar last Sunday during Holy Communion. Billy Haven shut off his American Eagle tattoo machine to save the batteries. He squatted back and he examined his work so far. Eyes scanning, less than ideal conditions, but the art was good. He always put everything he could into your mods. From the simplest cross on a waitress's shoulder to an American flag on a contractor's chest, complete with multiple folds in 3 colors and a blowing in the wind. He inked like Michelangelo laboring away on the church ceiling. God and Adam, fingerskin to fingerskin. Now here, Billy could have rushed. Considering the circumstances, nobody would have blamed him. But no, the mod had to be a Billy mod. What they called it back home in his shop. He felt a tickle sweat. With a gloved hand, wiped sweat from his eyes. put the tissue into a pocket. Carefully, so no fibers would flake off. Telltale fibers that could be dangerous to him as the inking was to Chloe. The face shield was cumbersome, but necessary. His tattoo instructor had taught him this lesson. He'd had Billy slip on one before the boy had even picked up a machine for the first time. Billy, like most young apprentices, had protested. Got eye protection, don't need more. It wasn't cool. Wearing a dorky mask was like giving newbies in their first inking a pussy ball to squeeze. Tat up. Get over it. But then his instructor had Billy sit beside him while he inked a client. A little work, Ozzy Osbourne's face, for some reason. Man, the blood and fluid that splattered. The face guard was flecked as Pickup's windshield in August. Be smart, Billy. Remember. Sure. Ever since, he'd assumed that each customer was ripe with Hep C and B and HIV and whatever other sexual diseases were popular. And for the mods he'd be inking over the next few days, of course he couldn't afford any blowback. So, protection. And he'd worn the latex mask and hood, too, to make sure he didn't shed any of his abundant hair or slough off epidermal cells. To distort his features as well. There was a remote chance that, despite his careful selection of the secluded kill zones, he'd get spotted. Billy Haven now examined his victim again. Chloe. He noted the name on the tag on her chest, the pretentious Je m'appelle, preceding it. Whatever that meant. Maybe hello? Maybe good morning, French? French. He lowered his gloved hand, double-gloved, and stroked her skin, pinching and stretching and noting the elasticity, the texture, the fine resilience. Billy noted, too, the faint rise between her legs, beneath the forest green skirt. The lower line of the bra, but there was no question of misbehaving. He never touched a client anywhere he shouldn't. That was flesh. This was skin. Two different things entirely. And it was skin that Billy Haven loved. He wiped more sweat with a new tissue, carefully tucked it away again. He was hot, his own skin prickling. Though the month was November, the tunnel was stifling. Long, about 100 yards, it sealed at both ends, which meant no ventilation. It was like many of the passages here in Soho, south of Greenwich Village. Built in the 19th and 20th centuries, these tunnels honeycombed the neighborhood and had been used for transporting goods underground to and from factories and warehouses and transfer stations. Abandoned now, they were perfect for Billy's purposes. The watch on his right wrist hummed again. A similar sound from a backup watch in his pocket came for a few seconds later, reminding him of the time Billy often got lost in his work. Just let me get God's knuckle perfect, just a minute more. A clattering came from a bud microphone in his left ear. He listened for a moment, then ignored the noise and took up the American Eagle machine once more. It was an old-style model with a rotary head, which moved the needle like a sewing machine's rather than the modern devices that used a vibrating coil. He clicked it on. Zzz. Face shield down. A millimeter at a time, he inked with a lining needle, following the bloodline he'd done quickly. Billy was a natural-born artist, brilliant at pencil and ink drawing, brilliant at pastels, brilliant at needles. He drew freehand on paper, he drew freehand on skin. Most mod artists, however talented, use stencils prepared ahead of time, or, for the untalented, purchased, and then placed on skin for the inker to trace. Billy rarely did this. He didn't need to. From God's mind to your hand, his uncle had said. Now time to fill. He swapped needles, very, very carefully. For Chloe's tab, Billy was using the famous black letter font known more commonly as Gothic or Old English. It was characterized by very thick and very thin strokes. The particular family he used was Fractor. He selected this font because it was the typeface of the Gutenberg Bible, and because it was challenging. He was an artist, and what artist didn't like showing off his skills? 10 minutes later, and he was nearly done. How was his client doing? He scanned her body, then lifted her lids, eyes still unfocused. Her face gave a few twitches, though. The propofol wouldn't last much longer, but of course, by now one drug was replacing the other. Suddenly, pain coursed through his chest. This alarmed him.
He was young and in very good shape. He dismissed the thought of a heart attack, but the question remained. Had he inhaled something he shouldn't have? That was very real and lethal possibility. Then he probed his body and realized the pain was on the surface, and he understood. When he'd first grabbed her, Chloe had fought back. He'd been so charged he hadn't noticed how hard she'd struck him. But now the adrenaline had worn off and the pain was throbbing. He looked down. Hadn't caused any serious damage, except for the tearing of his shirt and coveralls. He ignored the ache and kept going. Then Billy noted Chloe's breathing becoming deeper. The anesthetic would soon wear off. He touched her chest. Lovely girl wouldn't have minded. And beneath his hand, he could feel her heartbeat thudding more insistently. It was then that a thought occurred to him. What would it be like to tattoo a living, beating heart? Could it be done? Billy had broken into a medical supply company a month ago in anticipation of his plans here in New York. He made off with thousands of dollars in equipment, drugs, chemicals, and other materials. He wondered if he could learn enough to put someone under, crack open a chest, and ink a design or words onto the heart itself, so the victim back up, living out his or her life with altered organ. What would the work be? Cross? The words rule of skin? Maybe. Billy plus lovely girl forever. Interesting idea. But thinking about lovely girl made him sad, and he returned to Chloe, finishing the last of the letters. Good. A Billy Maud. But not quite finished yet. He extracted a scalpel from the dark green toothbrush container and reached forward, stretching out the marvelous skin once more.